The science fiction writer Philip K. Dick said that it always seemed to him that in the midst of great tragedy, there was always this terrible possibility that something terribly funny could happen. And I think this is very nicely illustrated by a joke about two parents who were trying to console their son after his dog had died. And they said to him, "Son, you shouldn't be too sad. Skipper's in heaven with God." And the boy was perplexed. He said, "I don't get it. What would God want with a dead dog?" And so to sort of plagiarize Solzhenitsyn, we could say that the line between tragedy and comedy cuts through the heart of every human experience. Of course, there is a great deal in life that is very serious, but laughter doesn't have to be far away. And this is one of the things that I've learned from the great post-Victorian journalist G K Chesterton. Chesterton dealt with many serious subjects, but always managed to do so with a very light touch. He believed that joy is ontological, which is to say it is the ground of our being. He says that man is more himself when joy is the fundamental thing in him and grief the superficial. Melancholy should be an innocent interlude, a tender and fugitive frame of mind. Praise should be the permanent pulsation of the soul. Pessimism is at best an emotional half-holiday. Joy is the uproarious labor by which all things live. Chesterton is very critical of over-seriousness because for him it develops a kind of complacent attitude, a kind of stale perception. And Chesterton is the sworn enemy of any kind of stale thinking. He notices that the swiftest things are the softest things. A bird is active because a bird is soft. A stone is helpless because a stone is hard. The stone must by its nature go downwards because hardness is weakness. The bird cannot in its nature go upwards because fragility is force. Angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. He continues, he says that seriousness is not a virtue. It would be much more sensible to say that seriousness is a vice. It is really a natural trend or lapse into taking oneself gravely because it is the easiest thing to do. It is much easier to write a good Times leading article than a good joke in Punch. For solemnity flows out of men naturally, but laughter is a leap. It is easy to be heavy, hard to be light. Satan fell by the force of gravity. And so one of the things that I find so interesting is he equates the solemn with the satanic. It's almost as if to encounter pure evil, you don't have to go and attend some weird ritual cultic sacrifice. All you have to do is read Bertrand Russell. Although this is not exactly what Chesterton is getting at. What he's actually saying is that we should simply be aware of the fact that when we divorce the serious from the hilarious, we end up with a kind of a distorted view of things. So for Chesterton, truth and humor go together. Truth is a playground, and in this playground, the sublime and the ridiculous are not at odds with each other, but are two sides of the same paradoxical game. How can we be serious? By having fun. How can we have fun? By being serious. And this is why he says, so far from it being irrelevant to use silly metaphors on serious questions, it is one's duty. It is the test of one's seriousness. It is the test of a responsible religion or theory, whether it can take examples from pots and pans and boots and butter tubs. It is the test of a good religion, whether you can joke about it. Humor and vulnerability also go together. Chesterton says that if you have a good heart, you will always have some lightness of heart. You will always have the power of enjoying special human feasts and positive human good news. But the heart which is there to be lightened will also be there to be hurt. And so it should be obvious that Chesterton is not saying we should turn everything into a joke. What he's getting at is that we should be humble about what we know. And we find examples of this from Chesterton's own career. He was a formidable polymath, but he was always very humble about this. Someone, when he was giving a public address, shouted from the back for him to speak up, and his response was to say, "Good sister, don't worry, you're not missing a thing." On another occasion, someone said to him that he seemed to know everything. His response was, "I know nothing, madam, I am a journalist." When asked what he thought of the German language, he said, "I regard it with a profound agnosticism." And so it's just amazing that Chesterton couples humor with humility. In fact, he said that the secret of life is something that we find in laughter and humility. And when you think about it, there's a kind of weird truth here. A good joke is humbling. Chesterton notes that in the idea of being made to laugh, there is a kind of coercion. We're almost, so to speak, held at gunpoint by the joke. It's an almost violent thing, and yet we have a kind of Stockholm syndrome when it comes to humor. We do not mind being held hostage by the comical. But this does raise a question. Where does the comical come from? What is the anatomy of the joke? For Chesterton, the joke begins simply with being human. He says, man himself is a joke in the sense of a paradox. He cannot sleep in his own skin. He cannot trust his own instincts. He is at once a creator moving miraculous hands and fingers and a kind of cripple. He is wrapped in artificial bandages called clothes. He is propped on artificial crutches called furniture. His mind has the same doubtful liberties and the same wild limitations. Alone among the animals, he is shaken with the beautiful madness called laughter, as if he had caught sight of some secret in the very shape of the universe, hidden from the universe itself. Chesterton notes that we laugh at man because we recognize in him something that is almost divine. In short, we recognize his dignity. He says that unless a thing is dignified, it cannot be undignified. It is not funny that anything else should fall down, only that a man should fall down. No one sees anything funny in a tree falling down, or in a house falling down, or in a stone falling down. It is only when a man tumbles down that we laugh. Why do we laugh? Because it is a grave religious matter. It is the fall of man. Only man can be absurd, because only man can be dignified. And so we see that the anatomy of the joke is something that is intricately connected with the metaphysical anatomy of the human being. And this seems to apply as much to slapstick comedy as it does to verbal wit. When I ask, for example, how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb, and then respond, only one, but the light bulb must really want to change. It's not the light bulb that we find funny, but the psychologist. Yeah, and this is true. I mean, any joke that we listen to, it's somehow man or humankind is the butt of the joke in every case. Even when we laugh at animals, we laugh at them because they remind us of our humanity. When we laugh at monkeys, they're especially funny because they remind us of our own family members. But what are jokes for? Why do we have this capacity for the comical, the silly? And I think that Chesterton's philosophy helps us to get a sense of at least one of the functions of humor. It's helpful to refer to a parable that he tells. He tells a parable about an English yachtsman who sets off to discover a brand new country. But he's a bit of an idiot, and so he miscalculates his route and ends up landing back in England and planting a flag there, thinking it is someplace else. And Chesterton uses this parable of this confused yachtsman to highlight some very profound questions. He says, what could be more delightful than to have in the same few minutes all the fascinating terrors of going abroad combined with the humane security of coming home again? What could be more glorious than to brace oneself up to discover New South Wales and then realize with a gush of happy tears that it was really old South Wales? And what Chesterton does is he takes these questions and then he moves them back to what he says is the central problem for all philosophers. How can we contrive to be at once astonished at the world and yet at home in it? How can this world give us all the fascination of a strange town and the comfort and honor of being our own town? One of the great tragedies of our existence, I think, is that familiarity breeds unfamiliarity. We spend so much time with certain things, we get used to them, and so we stop noticing just how profound they are. We take existence for granted. It's something that Sherlock Holmes says, we see, but we do not observe. Chesterton's philosophy can be understood as a kind of consistent tirade, an argument against our tendency to take things for granted. One of the great philosophical questions has always been, why is there something rather than nothing? What Chesterton does is he doesn't pull us towards an obvious answer to the question. What he does instead is pull us back to the original astonishment that underpins the question. It is absolutely mind-bogglingly, profoundly amazing that there is anything at all. And yet, we seem to overlook this most obvious of facts. If philosophy begins with awe, as Plato and Aristotle said, Chesterton's philosophy is about bringing us back to that awe. He says that the world will never starve for want of wonders, but only for want of wonder. Humor, then, I think, is one way of recovering this initial astonishment at the unabashed quiddity of existence. It bathes the familiar in a new light and thus allows us to see it in a fresh way, to challenge what we have taken to be the status quo. It's not that humor will be the source of all awe or all wonder, but I think it is a pretty good place to start. And that, I think, is a pretty good place to end. Thank you.